Hello there, and welcome back to the Average Pundits podcast, your home for all things Premier League. And we have a little bit of a different topic for you guys today, not necessarily Premier League based. However, the team that we are going to be talking about today have just been promoted to the Premier League, and that is by winning the Championship. It's Leeds United. However, before we get into that, can I remind you to quickly subscribe, like, share it with all of your friends, or those who are interested in football and love the Premier League like we do. And by we, I mean me and my co-host, as always, Joe. How you doing, Joe?
Not too bad, mate. Not too bad at all. This is quite an exciting episode, really, because we've not really had the chance to cover a team, like Leeds United before. So definitely a different dynamic, and a team which have been out of the Premier League for so long, finally returning to bring some pretty interesting games and some pretty interesting, fan interactions next season, I think. So I reckon that Leeds are going to have a lot to offer, but we've definitely got a good little podcast lined up.
Oh yeah, Leeds have been that team that have kind of been missing. The atmosphere next year in the Premier League is going to be completely different, with or without fans. Who knows what the government have in the pipeline for the pandemic and crowds gathering. However, Leeds being in the Premier League next season is a very big thing, especially with their history, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But how do you think they fare next year in the Premier League?
Well, they've had an interesting campaign in the Championship. For so long now, I think Leeds have been knocking on the door of that upper kind of finish in the Championship, but they've never just had the final edge, to get them forward. But they've managed to find their way through to it now. So they've got a real big challenge. I mean, it's been, 14 years since they've been in the Premier League last. And since that time, so much has changed. The Championship is an absolutely brilliant league, but the Premier League is a whole nother different caliber. So they're coming up to play with teams which are ready to capitalise literally straight away. And based on the clubs which got promoted last season, we're seeing potential clubs going straight back down, like Aston Villa and Norwich are already going down. We're already aware of that. And then you've got the exception of Sheffield United, who came in and took everyone by storm and completely surprised us all. And I would argue, Leeds have probably got a lot more money. They're probably a lot more of a marketable club with their history than a club like Sheffield United. So I think they come in with the potential to kind of hit the ground running straight away. But it all depends, I think, in my opinion, on what they can do in the summer. I think if they have a strong summer, I think they can start to, hopefully get some good results in the Premier League and stay up.
Absolutely, and I think that the Leeds success story does start with the hiring of Marcelo Bielsa, who came in 2018. I think it was June 2018, after the previous manager got sacked, and he brought along a philosophy that he'd brought, at places like, he managed the Argentinian team for a bit. He was at Lazio and Marseille, all these massive European clubs, and settling here, not necessarily winning any silverware elsewhere other than maybe an Olympic medal, but that's about it. And Bielsa's never been one to have won silverware across Europe. And Bielsa coming into Leeds and putting his philosophy into a Championship team, which may not have necessarily been seen before, and importing his impressive formation and his style of play that's helped these players that we have seen in the past, maybe inside the Premier League, not do so well, and help them grow. And I'm sure that we're going to get onto one of the players that has been a extreme surprise for everyone watching the Championship this season, who has known that player come through. And what do you think of Marcelo Bielsa's style of play?
He's a really interesting manager. He's certainly a character, and I feel like character managers, when I think of characters, I think of Jose Mourinho, I think of Antonio Conte, Louis van Gaal. I think of these managers with a kind of a personality larger than life, and from the sidelines you can see them really kind of influencing the game with what they're telling the players, and then they'll take that through to the interviews and stuff, and you get a lot from those kind of managers. Managers like Jose Mourinho have built a lot of success off their own arrogance and their ego and stuff. And I don't think Bielsa's particularly different. I think he's extremely clever, But, he's such a highly commended manager. It's absolutely crazy. A couple of quotes about him. First one that comes to mind for me would probably be Pep Guardiola. And this is a direct quote from Guardiola. My admiration for Marcelo Bielsa is huge because he makes the players much, much better. Still, I didn't meet one guy, a former player from Marcelo Bielsa, who speaks no good of him. They are grateful about his influence on their careers in football. He helped me a lot with his advice. Whenever I speak with him, I always feel like he wants to help me. He's the best coach in the world. Now, I'm not exactly sure the exact era of when he said that, but to call him the best coach in the world from Pep Guardiola, somebody who has, ascended to the heights he's reached, it's definitely quite a compliment. And managerial counterpart Maurizio Pochettino also was quoted saying he's like my football father. We are a generation of coaches that were his disciples, and how he feels about football, the passion he has for football, I think we all took that from him. And, the list of quotes here go on. There are some really, really influential people who have got some incredible things to say about him. But I think that kind of shows, what the Premier League is getting. They're getting another character back in the league, and they're getting somebody who could potentially come in and change an awful lot about how we're seeing tactical football. But like I said before, I think he's definitely a man about, man management, and he can definitely work a lot on and off the pitch. But I think without the players to keep up with the standard and the pace of the league, I think he will struggle, despite him being a good manager, personally.
Yeah, and with Bielsa, as you say, it brings another style of play and a different character. It's sort of what we saw when Wolves were promoted with Nuno Espirito Santo, who has come in and shown a different philosophy and a different style of play that the Premier League are used to seeing, and the different style of play that, it's definitely working for them and can continue to work under his reign. Can we see Wolves' style clash with merge with the way that Leeds might play as well? And can we see Leeds pull off, an absolutely staggering amount of points in their first season in the top flight?
It's interesting, isn't it? At the moment, it's kind of all on the table. We've got. It's because it's been so long that they've been outside of the Premier League. It's extremely hard to predict what the market and what the atmosphere is going to be like for them when they actually join. In terms of areas they need to maybe focus on, they didn't score particularly too many goals in the Championship this season. Their top scorer, to my knowledge, was Patrick Bamford with 16, which was interesting. Patrick Bamford, definitely leading the line. I don't think he's necessarily been the most prominent striker throughout a lot of his career, coming up through Chelsea and on his several loan moves. But he's had, a positive season in the Championship, with Pablo Hernandez being second, scoring 9 in 35. And then it's Klitsch, I think, who had 7 in 46 appearances for the club. So, those top three, there's signs there. But coming into the Premier League, especially a striker like Patrick Bamford, he was last in the Premier League in, I believe, was it the 2016-2017 season where he was with Middlesbrough? And that's the season where Middlesbrough went down, and then he also went to Burnley in the same season, I believe. But in that, all of his performances that he's had in that particular season, he had 15 on pitch appearances and only managed 1 goal, no assists. It's a little bit scary. That's not massively long ago. You're only looking at 3 years outside of the Premier League, and his last stint in the Prem didn't exactly go too well. So that would be a slight concern for me with him coming back into the league. I'm not sure if maybe another striker would be needed, Reece.
With Bamford's situation, I think that him underperforming in the Premier League and then coming to the Championship with the style of play of Bielsa and the whole Leeds system, I think it just shows how good of a manager Bielsa is to try and get the service with the formation that he has up towards Patrick Bamford. Bielsa plays a 4-2-3-1 with 2 wide cams and a middle cam, and gets that service to Patrick Bamford where he can get into those positions and he can score. Whereas previously, I don't think that he was the sole focus of a team. Whereas, Dwight Gale is that type of player that was, up and down for so many years. He would be at Crystal Palace, not score too many goals, and then come to the Championship and light the world on fire. So I think we could be looking at a Dwight Gale 2.0, if I'm honest, with Patrick Bamford coming into the league, lighting it on fire and doing better than he would do in the Premier League. It is a step down in quality, and I think that maybe if he doesn't quite hit the ground running in the Premier League, I think that Bielsa could be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I think I agree there. It's all about how, excuse me, it's all about how you get off to a good positive start, really. I mean, on the other hand of that, Norwich this season, they started extremely strongly with Timo Pukki. He was scoring all over the pitch, and everyone was thinking, if he keeps this up, he's an early contender for the Golden Boot. But it wasn't long until we started seeing that magic fade, and then the real cracks in that Norwich team start to really, really, really become prominent. It wouldn't be terrible for Leeds to look at the clubs going down and potentially save a few of their players, because I feel like, for every poor performance Norwich has had, they've had individual players who have managed to, kind of set the world on light at times. They've definitely had a couple of more prominent players, but I don't exactly think that'll be enough. It's all about who they can actually kind of lure into the club, and I honestly think most of their business is going to be from abroad. But the opportunity to work under a manager like Bielsa could be enough to bring people to the club.
Yeah, like the managerial side of things is something that the philosophy that it can get behind. Like with I'll bring back constantly the comparisons to Nuno. No one ever thought that Wolves would get the super agent that they did, and when they kept bringing in these Portuguese imports, it was insane. But then you've got the whole Andrea Radrizzani, who is the owner of joint or majority owner of Leeds United, who will have to actually input a lot of money into the club when they go up. You get funds for winning the league, all the TV rights and stuff like that to help you push off. We saw that with Aston Villa; they spent 100 million and still went down. So maybe it not necessarily is bringing in a lot of money, or not necessarily a lot of money. Sorry, a lot of players for a big fee. Wesley coming into to Aston Villa, and they didn't do well at all. They're borderline relegation. So I think Leeds need to be careful when they do come up, that they don't spend recklessly, they don't spend too wildly, and they have a trusting system. They need team chemistry at the end of the day. That's kind of what has made Liverpool so good this season, is the team chemistry that they've had and the understanding. Whereas Man City, they've had a few faults now and again. Injuries have played into account with played in part, and I think it shows with Sheffield United. Bringing it back to Wilder that we were talking about off camera, and how he has molded the Sheffield United team to have as much team chemistry as possible. I think if Marcelo can do that with this Leeds team, have a lot of team chemistry, spirit, and a will to win, hard work, coming in and training, no nonsense business, I think that they can. I mean, they definitely stand a chance of staying up. That's for sure.
Yeah. It is just 100% all about how you hit the ground running and how you adapt. But one real benefit to having Leeds back in the league are some real, reignited rivalries, which Leeds were very prominent with back in the early days of the Premier League. Probably the most famous being a rivalry with Manchester United. I don't know if Manchester United need any more top rivalries in the league. We've obviously got Liverpool and Man City, who are at the moment definitely better than we are as a club in the past few years. So, having Leeds in there to maybe hopefully dust up Leeds would be interesting, but having a club of that caliber back in, will create a whole nother level. The Leeds United derby, that game is an extremely interesting match. So I'm looking forward to seeing that again. But then again, Leeds have their own kind of little smaller rivalries with Liverpool and Chelsea, and even down in the Championship, clubs like Millwall and Huddersfield and stuff like that, Sheffield Wednesday, they've had extremely good games against. So there's always a bit more of an edge when Leeds are back in the league as well. So I think we're going to get some extremely interesting games, and there's a lot of passionate fans. Maybe hopefully things are kept on wraps. We don't want to get into out of hand, but I think there'll be some fiery games in the league this next season.
You mentioned the Leeds fans, like they have gone through some very dark times being a Leeds fan since their last time in the Premier League. I mean, taking it back, the Leeds actually, the last time they were in the Premier League was the invincible season for Arsenal. So, I mean, them getting promoted, Arsenal fans start getting excited because you might win the league next season. And the last time Liverpool won the league as well, Arsenal might won the league the year after as well. So again, Arsenal fans get excited. But back to Leeds for a second, and since they got relegated in that 2003-2004 season, they have only qualified for the playoffs in the Championship once, and that was the 05-06 season. They were unsuccessful in that season before Bielsa came in, and then the next season they got relegated to League One. That was a horrible time for Leeds fans. I think a lot of them started to drop off, and then they got promoted back to the Championship in 2010. Since then, it was kind of a mid-table mediocrity, with all the different managers, and they kind of just didn't finish anywhere above 13th until the season where Marcelo Bielsa comes in and he takes them immediately to the playoffs. They did lose I think it was 4-2 on aggregate to Derby, who then went unlost to Aston Villa in the playoff finals. But it was still huge progress that no one had really seen from Leeds, or coming from Leeds in some time. So I think it was a very big step up for Leeds. Like, how do you think that Marcelo Bielsa's come in and changed that sort of mentality of Leeds' mid-table mediocrity, and then now to the winning mentality?
I think a lot of it's all with the reputation that preceded him. When a manager like that takes a chance and goes to a club you maybe wouldn't have first expected them to go to. Leeds obviously a huge club, but obviously not in the situation that they'd want to be in for quite a long amount of time, now. So I feel like when a manager comes and takes that risk, it does, probably fill the fans and the players with quite a lot of hope. But just having a good manager in, it wasn't going to be an overnight project. And obviously the Championship doesn't have the same kind of money as the Premier League, Serie A, La Liga. There's a lot less money, floating around that league. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he adapts later on to the Premier League when he actually does have the money. But I think Leeds, build-up success has been extremely gradual. It's taken a long time to get to where they are now. But I think that is a credit to the kind of character which he is. So I feel like, again, if he can carry that forward, I feel like it could be interesting. I definitely think he's the man to lead them forward. But we're going to see potentially a Leeds we haven't seen before, a Leeds with new era Premier League money. The money which Leeds have had on the seasons prior to them being relegated from the Premier League is completely different to what we're talking about now. But the question is, once you have the money, and I'm sure Leeds do have plenty of it, and I'm sure they're going to get a little bit more by joining the league again, it's just how you can adapt it. It's either, you spend all your money on one or two players, or they think about it a little bit more smart and they're starting to kind of build on the different areas around the pitch. I think they've conceded like a really small amount of goals in the Championship this season, which is a extreme credit to kind of the system they've built up. But I feel like next season is going to be a case of keeping that kind of record, but they're going to need more of an attacking output. And I said before, Patrick Bamford's previous Premier League record doesn't exactly fill me with hope that he would could translate it again. I think he's definitely more of a Championship striker. So in my opinion, a good quality Premier League level striker would be a good little nab for Leeds in the summer. That's something which I feel like is quite crucial for them to bring forward. But I think it's all up in the air for now. I mean, I'm really interested to see in the coming weeks. I mean, we haven't got long till the transfer window opens already, so we could see at the bat really early business from Leeds, which I think would definitely fill the fans with a lot of hope that they're going to keep up the momentum and stay in the league for the season to come.
Yeah, and with that, the hope for Leeds United fans, they will have their say on who they want to sign it, bring into the club. For those Leeds fans that are watching, please leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube, or get at us on Twitter at Pundits Average, or our Instagram page, The Average Pundits, and let us know what you think about your club and who you guys should sign over the coming weeks or months when the transfer window does open. I think that with the Championship teams that do come up, you don't want to spend too recklessly. You don't want to spend too much. I think the point that you raised earlier about having looking at the relegated teams going down, you can definitely nab a few really good players. I think the sort of the players that are kind of untouchable from those teams that will go to the top six. You've got the likes of Jack Grealish and John McGinn, who will be going to a top six club no matter what if Villa get relegated, or Todd Cantwell, who will be going to. I see him as a good fit at Spurs. But you can nab those players that are going down, like all those players that will want to get in on an act that they can get behind of. I know that maybe James Milner might be looking at going to Leeds and going back to the club that he's always loved and supported, And what a way to end James Milner's career. What would you think to potentially James Milner coming back?
That's definitely been one that's always kind of been floated around. And the idea of, players returning to where it all started and ending humbly, we saw Wayne Rooney get a stint back at Everton before his move to Derby. We've seen it, countless times. It's a story which everyone wants. Everyone wants their club heroes to come back. And, when it happens, it's really humbling to see. You got Ibrahimovic recently going back to AC Milan as well. That's a club where he had a lot of success at. Milner to go back to Leeds, I think that would definitely mean a lot to the fans. It would probably be good for him as well. He's exactly the kind of person which I feel could be a good captain for Leeds going into the Premier League. I feel like he could come in, his experience, he could definitely guide them to, staying up for their first season. That would be a really good gift for Milner to give to them before moving on with his career.
And then also, like, the fact that he can mentor all of these top-class players. And one that definitely springs to mind is Calvin Phillips, who has potentially been one of Leeds' best players all season. I know that he's been recognised as one of the targets for a lot of teams across the Premier League. And maybe he does want to stay with Leeds and get mentored by someone like James Milner, who has been through it all. He's been in the trenches with so many world-class midfielders, and could be argued that he is he's a Champions League winning player. He's a Premier League, a multi-time Premier League winning player, and he's been playing with teams that have been promoted before. He's been playing with teams that aren't necessarily a world-class level. He was playing at Aston Villa for a time before making the jump to Manchester City. So I think that if anybody knows the troubles of being a Leeds player and someone that has the passion to return to where it all started, I think James Milner's that one to bring Calvin Phillips in and make him, and turn him into one of those superstars for the Premier League era.
He's definitely looked as one of the stronger players at Leeds. I think, again, coming to the Premier League, it's a whole nother story. It's all about whether you can translate it. This season alone, you're looking at 37 appearances he's made in the Championship and 2 goals and 2 assists. Now, from a defensive-minded midfielder, it's not, he's not needed to do all the goals, all the assists. A lot of it's the work he does on and off the ball, trying to watch his vision and go back and help the defense out. So I feel like, definitely goals and assists don't replicate everything, especially when you play in a position where you're not prone to scoring too much. But, if your midfielders are contributing as well, and in the Premier League, that's certainly needed. They need to be the anchor of the team. And a modern CDM is desired for a lot of clubs in this transfer window, I would imagine. Every club is really looking for the players like the Wilfred and Ndidis, the Fabinhos, the top quality level CDMs. So I think he's probably going to be looked at by quite a few Premier League clubs. But my best kind of like advice for him would probably be to stay put where he is for at least a season and see how it goes. If Leeds stay up, potentially, he can move up from then. If they go down, he's likely to be saved. But I think one season staying at a club where the manager, the players around you, and adapting to the new league as a unit, I think is a very, very smart career choice.
I mean, for a man with so many, he's got an average of 2.6 tackles per game, a lot of, just over 1 clearances per game. He is kind of what you would look for in a central defensive midfielder. He's one of those players that you do want to have in the trenches, doing all the dirty work for you. As a manager, you'd love that sort of mentality. He does kind of remind you of a guy like an N'Golo Kante or a Wilfred Ndidi. He's got some of his characteristics that are very strong. He's through balls, his passing's great. He's really good in the air. The passing, key passes forward. On the defensive side as well, I've mentioned his tackling. He's always diving in front of the ball when it's there's a shot on goal, and just his concentration and mentality for his style of play. He loves to shoot from distance. He loves to play those long balls, and he's very good at getting stuck in. And when you look at a player like that, teams are going to pay attention. Teams are going to want that player. You look at him and think, where would he fit best? I mean, you look at Manchester United, who have been struggling in the central defensive midfield department currently. You've got Matic there, but he's only going to age. And you look at Calvin Phillips, he's 24 years old. I think Manchester United could benefit off a player that is growing and can play with. He loves to stay back and do all the work. he can run around for 90 minutes and do all the, make up for what Bruno and Pogba don't necessarily have, which is a defensive acumen.
I mean, the idea doesn't necessarily offend me. I think this season, I'd counter that. I think Nemanja Matic this season has been a renaissance player. I think he's been, the season prior when Mourinho left and Oli first came in, he was having arguably the worst season of his career. But this season, because he's played less games, because like you said, he is getting on now, and because there's been a bit of a rotation in there, by the time he does come back into the team, he's well rested, he's aware, he's been watching how the team play, and I think Matic has been brilliant. But I think a CDM for United, I think, is something we'll probably lay off for at least this window. I think it's not necessarily on the priority list as much as it was maybe a season ago. But I 100% agree. If a player like Calvin Phillips can come up from the Championship, have a great first season in the Premier League, and start to show clubs, why he was attracted interest in the first place, then I would 100% not be against it. It would probably be a cheaper move than going for like a Wilfred Ndidi from a Leicester, or trying to go and pick one of the top performing CDMs out of Europe somewhere. But he's definitely a player which interests me. I think it's time that we see him in the Premier League, and thankfully we're going to be able to this season.
It's definitely going to be a fresh face for us all to keep our eyes on. He's definitely going to be one of those players to watch. I know that all the top scouts and all the top pundits are going to be looking towards him in this Leeds side, and whether they bring in someone else alongside him is going to be another question, because that is what's going to be the key. As we've mentioned before, Marcelo Bielsa's got to bring in some players this summer in order to have that successful run. And I mean, who can we see? Like, for those that aren't really familiar with Leeds, they don't have potentially that stardom of Premier League talent. They've had to loan in a lot of their players this year. They've loaned in Jean-Kevin Augustin, who hasn't really played that much, Helder Costa, who's been one of their standout players, and also Eddie Nketiah from Arsenal, who I'm not sure what he's done this season because I'm not that up to date with the Championship. But these are all class players, but they've been brought in on loan, and now it's going to have to be bringing in players, because in the Championship you do have a bit of financial fair play. You do have to turn over the money that you earn, and you can't spend as much in the Championship. Whereas in the Premier League, anything, well, apart from Manchester City spending 600 million in 1 year, you're fine. And with Leeds, they can happily go out and spend 100 million on players if they know they're going to get it back. Their owners are worth about, I think it's around about 500 million. So it's not like they don't have owners that are willing to invest, because they have a world-class manager right now. And who better to bring Leeds back to the promised land of the Premier League than Marcelo Bielsa?
I think a really interesting point that they need to pay attention to as well when it comes to this window, that they need to look at what Villa did last season, because this season rather, when Villa got promoted, they came in and they spent roughly around £100 million, and they bought players in like Wesley at striker. I think they made Mings' move, permanent. They bought in the name's escaping me. They bought Douglas Luiz midfield as well. They spent a lot of money all over the pitch. And I think that probably filled the Villa fans with some hope. It was like, oh God, okay, we're spending a bit of money now, and £100 million it's a lot of money, but in this current climate, that's it's like, okay, yeah, that's kind of expected. And they spent that money, and now look at the position Villa are in now. It hasn't really helped them. They've really been struggling this season. If not for, club captain Jack Grealish, who was already there, players like John McGinn as well. Douglas Luiz has had a pretty good season in general, in my opinion, as well. If not for a few standout players in that team, I think Villa would be in a guaranteed relegation position like Norwich. I mean, I thought they were destined to go down, but they're fighting to the bitter end now to stay up. And if they do stay up, it'll be very lucky from them after some extremely mediocre performances this season. So I think Leeds can take that and learn a lesson from it. They can say, there's nothing wrong with spending the money, but a man like Bielsa, who I know how, dedicated he is and how many hours he spends, on the pitch and at the training offices and stuff like that, I feel like he is going to be already well versed with his transfer targets. If he's not already talking to them now, it wouldn't surprise me. So I feel like a manager of Bielsa's caliber may be able to take that same amount of money and do a lot more with it. I definitely think Villa haven't their kind of like targets and their transfer market dealings were definitely not favoured. But I would definitely put my money on Leeds being able to do a little bit more as long as they get the financial backing.
I think when you do have a manager like Marcelo Bielsa, you do have the ability to have those top scouts like Nuno did at Wolves. You have those super agents. Maybe he does have a bit of sway in those super agents that you have, and trying to get those players that are proven commodities, those that have been firing on all cylinders, or those that have promise to be striking on all cylinders, but not necessarily have reached that this season because of the management that they've been in. I mean, imagine if they were to go out and spend maybe 10 or less million on Timu Pukki and do what he did with Patrick Bamford and have him score, but on relight that fire that he had at the beginning of the year, and just have him maintain that and have him have a strike partner, or even have this 4-2-3-1 with two wide cams and get him the ball, because he can finish it. I think it's just the service that Pukki's had over the progressive stages of the Premier League season. It's been really lacking. I mean, the only real glimmer of hope in that Norwich team since August really have been Cantwell and Max Aarons, who are most definitely on their way out. But if they can pick out some of these Norwich players, a Pukki, what's the harm in that? Maybe they can score a few more goals, or it can be off the bench. They could pick up, Buendia, who's also going down. He, can be a result of a bit of controversy now and again, but he's a decent player. Who would you say is like the best players to pick from these, potential relegated teams that would be, the best fitting for a team coming up like Leeds?
I think you look at the pool of players of teams you've got down at the bottom. You've got obviously Norwich, which are already going down. You mentioned already Timu Pukki, Max Aarons. I think Jamal Lewis, Cantwell, Buendia. These are all players which I'd look at saving straight away. I think Jamal Lewis has had a really good season. I think he's been underrated at times. I mean, he hasn't been the standout player as much as Max Aarons, but whenever I've seen him play, I think he's been a lot more competent than a lot of players on that pitch. Certainly Buendia, certainly Cantwell, certainly Timu Pukki potentially. I mean, he had a few goals this season. It's definitely started very well. Other clubs which are likely to go down again, Aston Villa. You've got players there who are potentially worth keeping and trying to stay up, but it's going to be tough. John McGinn and Jack Grealish are the two top ones at that club, in my opinion, and I feel like they both deserve a big move each. So maybe Villa might be a bit harder to get the talent out of. In terms of the other clubs which are going down, you've got places like Bournemouth and Watford, these kind of clubs that are battling it out. I think it will be Bournemouth, in my opinion. I mean, I'm happy to go on the record saying that. I think Bournemouth probably should go down now. I think Eddie Howe's been there too long. He's almost going down with the sinking ship at this rate. And he's a really good manager as well. He's a good guy, but he should have taken his chance to move when he did, So now that Bournemouth are going down, in my opinion, they have a club with an absolutely amazing talent pool. Nathan Ake is already a target for Manchester City, and that's not a move which would surprise me at all. I'd be frustrated if United don't inquire about him. And then you've got other players like Ryan Fraser, who he already knows leaving the club. You've got David Brooks, Lewis Cook, Callum Wilson, and Josh King. There are so many players there which all deserve to be in the Premier League. If I was Leeds United and Bournemouth do end up going down, I'd look at Bournemouth and I'd say, you know what, let's start working a plan out. I want to take as many players off you as I can, because in my opinion, out of all the clubs which are looking like they're going down or are relegated, I think Bournemouth definitely have the most talent there. But sadly, they just haven't had the form this season to keep themselves up. But I think Bournemouth would definitely be a good club to look at. But we've got it all to look for, Reece, haven't we? It's all coming up soon. We've got the transfer window to look forward to. And, it's always interesting seeing newly promoted clubs and how they handle their business. So I, for one, am extremely excited to see what they can get up to. And I'm extremely excited for that first Manchester United Leeds game back. That'll be really good to see.
The atmosphere there is going to be absolutely unfathomable. The hatred towards those fans is going to be amazing, and I can't wait to witness the amount of abuse that are being spat at the United fans. But it is really intriguing to look at the teams that are going to come up, and maybe you do have those teams that are, who else do you see? Potentially West Brom. I know that Brentford are potentially, like, we will deep dive into, as we're doing right now, into Leeds, into those teams that do come up. Who do you think do stand a chance of coming up with Leeds at the moment?
I'd want to see West Brom and Brentford come up. I think Brentford are a club, an extremely new and exciting kind of project they've got going on there. And we've seen West Brom in the Premier League so often, once they have, a bit of consistency in the league, hopefully they can stay up, because they often provide a few really good games. And, they're a club not too far from where we're based as well. So it'd be interesting to see another club from, kind of like Midlands-based area, performing back in the Premier League again. So I'd like to see West Brom and Brentford come back up to the league, and hopefully we can get some good performances out of them.
Absolutely, and we can't wait to share the experiences of the newly promoted teams with you guys. As always, do leave a like and subscribe if you are new around here, or if you like the content that we do share it around with everybody. Follow us on our streaming platforms, Apple Music and Spotify, to make sure that you keep a listen out as to when we upload our podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at Pundits Average, our Instagram, The Average Pundits, our Facebook, The Average Pundits, and our business email for any inquiries, theaveragepundits@outlook.com. Joe, thank you very much for joining me on this podcast.
No worries, mate. It's been a pleasure.
As always, don't forget to subscribe and all that good stuff. Keep up to date with The Average Pundits, and we'll see you guys next time.